Show you the rankings 1 through 12. These are our consensus rankings. You can see them on CBSSports.com as well if you want to see the individual rankings for mine, for Dave, and for Heath. Josh Allen coming off that big game, no surprise, he's at number 1. I am hopeful, I hope you guys are as well, Dave, is Joe Burrow going to bounce back against the Jaguars?
I sure hope so. That's got high-scoring game written all over it. Jacksonville's secondary still a humongous question mark with or without Travis Hunter playing cornerback. I think that Joe Burrow just always, for whatever reason, slow start against the Cleveland Browns. I think he bounces back from it. Look for him to have 3 touchdowns at least.
And you see Baker Mayfield down there at the bottom. We're going to tell you why he might not be the best play, at least according to Heath Cummings, as we get into our starts and sits for week number 2. Let's show you the rankings 13 through 24, and there's a name that you have not seen yet that you will see on this list as the backup quarterback. So you're starting this player in 2 quarterback leagues and Superflex leagues, and that's Patrick Mahomes coming in at number 13. He's a sit for me. We'll explain that later. I know, Dave, you're a little bit more excited about Mahomes for this week.
Yeah.
When you look at this list, Heath, is there a guy? Last week we saw Rodgers jump up. We saw McCarthy jump up. We saw Daniel Jones play well. Who's going to be the one player on this list that we're not going to talk about, but maybe could just surprise us across the board?
Yeah, I think one of them I'm definitely going to talk about in about 60 seconds. The other one would be Jordan Love that you talked about against the Commanders tonight. I thought he did a good job in his first game. They were in a situation where the Lions couldn't score against them. So they were able to continue with that, not throwing the ball very much, only 22 pass attempts. I would expect we get north of 30 pass attempts from Jordan Love in this game, and he gives you right around 20 fantasy points.
Very interesting, because the over-under is 29.5 pass attempts for Jordan Love. So you like the over. I would take the under just slightly, just because I do think it'll be a little bit more of a defensive game. All right, so as you're going to find when you watch this show every week, every Thursday, we'll be here at 1 o'clock Eastern. We're going to talk about the players that are toughest for us to rank, give you some starts, give you some sits. So we'll start with the toughest decision. Dave, who is the toughest quarterback for you to rank in week number 2?
I'm still struggling with JJ McCarthy, and he's not a top 12 quarterback for me just yet. But, man, are we getting the guy that just looked terrible in the first 2.5 quarters against the Bears? Or are we getting the guy that just shined at the end of the game, looked like a total gamer? I have him just outside my top 12, Jamie. I think he's a pretty good quarterback. I love the offense he's in, love the receivers he throws to. I'm not convinced that the Falcons' defense is as good as the Bucs made him look last week. I think he is a borderline start this week.
First game for him in, 600 days, after missing all of the rookie season in 2024. So feeling out process, and then he finally got comfortable and looked like he was the guy that they drafted to be their future quarterback. And it's just this Kevin O'Connell system. It's hard to get past what he's able to do with these quarterbacks and stay in the course. He was able to have a big game. Heath, the toughest guy for you, Caleb Williams. Why?
It's Caleb Williams because he scored 25 fantasy points last week and couldn't hit a barn on half of his throws, but the running was awesome. The offense was awesome. They had guys open all the time. If Caleb Williams is just a little bit accurate, he looks like we're going to get the breakout season where he's a top 10 quarterback. It's just hard to trust it because when you start to rank Caleb Williams too high, you just see the flashbacks of DJ Moore open, the ball 5 yards away from him. DeAndre Swift running out in the flat, and the ball is going over his head into the sideline. The quality of the passing was not near as good as the quality of the fantasy production. 2
questions. One, do you expect him to run as much? Because over 50 yards rushing and did have 1.5 touchdowns. So he got the 1 rushing touchdown, almost had a second one. And the second question would be, is Ben Johnson facing his former team? So maybe another wrinkle or 2 knowing this defense. And then, Dave, you can counter just because you obviously do not have him ranked as high, 24th for you.
Yeah, I think we're going to see him run 6 to 7 times per game. And some of that is because that he's good at that, and some of that is because he can't find the right guy to throw to, so he just takes off and runs. And coaches hate that. Fantasy managers love that because you get fantasy points in that way. The Lions part's interesting. I think about it more from the Lions offense against the Bears defense. But, yeah, I think that if anybody knows where to expose this Lions defense, it should be Ben Johnson.
I think the Lions defense will have a much easier time this week than last week because I just feel like Caleb Williams needs to calm down. And until that happens, you're going to see this frenetic style that he had. And I don't know if we can count on these rushing numbers, the 6 to 7 carries. If we could count on that, he'd be a top 12 quarterback pretty much every single week, given the receivers that he has. And as for Ben Johnson, as far as him in the offense goes, I'm not sure how much of the playbook Ben Johnson is willing to actually open up in this game because Caleb Williams can't do the easy things consistently well. he makes me nervous. I'd rather start a bunch of other quarterbacks.
Again, having him 24th, that makes sense. I think as we're all just consensus-wise, you see a number 2 fantasy quarterback for us. So despite the big performance, just be a little bit cautious with him as a starter in a 1-quarterback league. So the toughest guy for me, and it's to start for you, Dave, is Bo Nix, because he looked awful in week 1 against Tennessee. And a lot of people questioning, is he going to be the C.J. Stroud? Is he going to have the guy that has the sophomore slump after a great rookie season, especially the way that he finished his rookie year? So he's still a number 1 quarterback for me, but a borderline guy. And I think pretty close for all 3 of us here just because 10th or lower. In the case of the matchup, I also don't want to put too much stock into the Colts defense because it was a very bad Dolphins game plan and a very bad Dolphins offense led by Tua Tagovailoa. So I'm hoping to see Bo Nix bounce back. But when you hear Sean Payton say, I need to get a little bit more of the running game involved, I need to maybe take some of the pressure off of Bo Nix, that doesn't really inspire confidence in his second-year quarterback, but he's a start for you nonetheless.
Look at who he's playing. It's playing against the Indianapolis Colts. They have a good pass rush. Their secondary is all banged up. I think this is a get-right spot for Bo Nix. The one thing I worry about with him is the same thing that I worried about with Caleb Williams. It's the rushing. He wasn't very effective running the ball last week. He did it enough, but I think this is a great matchup for the Broncos to find their run game and keep it going. They found it toward the end of last week, and that might lean into Bo Nix not throwing as much, not running as much. He's a borderline starter. You said it best.
All right, so we'll see how Bo Nix bounces back. We'll see how Dak Prescott bounces back to start for you for week number 2. Dak threw the ball very well, but only 7.8 fantasy points in week 1 against the Eagles.
Well, it was against the Eagles. Now he's against the Giants. That might be all the analysis you need for Dak Prescott this week because there was really nothing in his performance that caused me concern. I don't care at all about CeeDee Lamb's drops. In fact, I expect that makes him perhaps a little bit more motivated this week. I expect him to have a big game as my number 1 wide receiver on the week. Cowboys should be able to do whatever they want on offense this week.
But I don't think they have to do a lot on offense because I don't think the Giants' offense is going to be able to do much of anything, and that could limit just how much Dak Prescott throws in the game. I think you could pencil him in for 20 or 21 fantasy points. That's what we would have said last week, and he only had 7. So it makes me a little bit nervous to trust him as a full-fledged starting fantasy quarterback. I kind of like JJ McCarthy a little bit more.
Makes sense, if you're going to trust McCarthy and maybe the boom-bust potential of what he could be. I just think Jerry needs a win. Dak's going to be the guy to go get Jerry a win, and they're going to do it by a lot of aerial attack performance that way. Get CeeDee Lamb back on track. No Micah McFadden, the tight end, has a lot of opportunities here. Maybe even George Pickens gets a splash play. And I don't want to buy into Javonte Williams.
I was going to say, if they're trying to run the ball, they're still going to be throwing on 3rd down.
Yes, and the one thing, just in regards to Javonte Williams, we have coming up later in the show, Robert Turbin, former NFL running back, joining us. We're going to break down some of the more surprising performances from week number 1. And his guy is Javonte Williams and just what he was able to accomplish. So we'll talk about Javonte a little bit more. For me, my start is the start of the week. It's Jared Goff. I like the opportunity for him to bounce back. We said what Caleb Williams potentially could do against the Lions there. I think it's going to be a big game for Jared Goff because last week that's probably going to be the worst that this Lions offense looks. At least that's the hope. And so a lot of that had to do with the defense that they faced, the scenario they were in Green Bay. So back home, indoors, I know the Bears defense looked really good for 3 quarters against JJ McCarthy. That was McCarthy making his first start. This is, in my opinion, a big bounce back spot for Jared Goff. Now, if he does not play well and the Lions offense looks awful again, then everything you said this offseason, Heath, is really going to hit the panic button because they couldn't run the ball. There was no Jameson Williams splash plays. Amon-Ra St. Brown was kept in check. Really, it was a great highlight for Isaac Tesla and a lot of production for Sam Laporta, but that's not what we need. We need these guys to play well. I think Jared Goff will provide it. All right, let's go to the sit quarterback. So your sit quarterback, obviously Dak Prescott, you gave your reasons why. Your sit quarterback, though, is very, very tough for a lot of people to get away from, and that's Baker Mayfield.
It'd be easier to get away from if he hadn't thrown that 3rd touchdown pass to Emeka last week because he really was not very good outside of the touchdowns. 152 yards passing, 53% completion percentage, and last year he was a very touchdown-dependent quarterback. That worked out fine because he posted an astronomically high touchdown rate. This week, they have an implied team total of 20 total points. Last week, and Dave made me look this up, so I'll give him credit for the research, there were 8 teams that had an implied total below 21 points. Half of those teams scored 13 or fewer. 2 of those teams, the Steelers and Jets, were good. So maybe this will be one of the few teams that's good for fantasy with a low total. But I think the bigger problem for Baker Mayfield is like Mike Evans can still be good in a game where the Buccaneers score 17 or 20 points because he catches 6 balls for 70 yards. Emeka Egbuka can still be good in that type of game. Baker Mayfield is really dependent on throwing 2+ touchdown passes, and it's hard to project that in a game with a total this low.
I probably have him too high, but I still think he's a top 12 fantasy quarterback. I think he can find 2 touchdowns against the Texans pretty easily. The yardage will be moderate, not necessarily high. I just don't know how well Tampa's going to be able to run the ball in this game. And people who have Bucky Irving don't want to hear that. Thank goodness that Bucky Irving caught a touchdown pass last week. I think Bucky can make some plays through the air again this week. I think that's how the Bucs navigate around this Texans offense. Get the ball out quick, attack the middle of that defense, and then look for Egbuka and Evans. Those touchdowns to Egbuka last week, excellent throws by Baker Mayfield. He's still on his game, so I want to start him on fantasy football.
We'll see how Baker does. It's surprising that they are underdogs on the road, especially the way the Texans offense looked,
right.
More so than the defense. Defense still very good. For me, I'm going to say Patrick Mahomes. Last week, I think you got, I don't want to say lucky for him to get, as a top 10 quarterback last week, but you just look at the scenario right now. No Xavier Worthy, no Rashee Rice, facing an Eagles defense, getting Jalen Carter back. They held Dak Prescott to under 10 fantasy points. We know what the Super Bowl looked like when it was supposed to be a competitive game for the first 3 quarters. Mahomes was miserable. He did get 2 touchdowns late in the game. Dave, I'm surprised you're still as high on Mahomes.
This is another guy that I have to move down because I kind of feel the same way about him as I do Dak Prescott, where the number is like right around 20, 21 fantasy points. You can't expect much more than that. But the difference between him and Dak Prescott is that I don't see a game script where Isaiah Pacheco runs wild on the Philadelphia Eagles. I don't think that that's happening at all. So Mahomes is going to have to throw a lot in this game. And if he's throwing a lot, he can still find his way to a couple of touchdowns. And he'll run. He did it last week. He's going to have to keep doing that. So I think he could still be a top 12 fantasy quarterback, not nearly as high as you see here.
All right, so Dave's still very confident in Baker Mayfield and Patrick Mahomes. Heath's trying to sit Baker Mayfield. I'm trying to sit Patrick Mahomes. You might have some quarterbacks that are available on the waiver wire who could help you for week number 2. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, Robert Turbot joins us. We're going to talk about the running back rankings for week number 2 and maybe some surprise starts and sits for your week 2 lineups.